Welcome back, everyone. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today because we're looking at something that is fundamentally changing the way we approach physical therapy. We are going to take a really structured, deeply fascinating look at how technology is completely revolutionizing rehabilitation. Seriously, forget everything you thought you knew about traditional physical therapy because today we're talking about plugging your own body directly into a dashboard.
So, can you actually train your mind to heal your body? It sounds a bit like magic, right? Well, unless you've got some hidden Jedi skills, it really isn't. Instead, we're going to look at a highly evidence-based technological mirror that reflects exactly what is happening under your skin in real time. We're talking about biofeedback. This is a tool that empowers you to gain conscious control over physiological activities you probably didn't even know you were doing.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today's explainer. 1. Decoding biofeedback technology. 2. The human feedback loop. 3. Biofeedback in physiotherapy. 4. Restoring movement and balance. And finally, 5. Conquering chronic physical pain.
Let's start right at the beginning with Section 1, Decoding Biofeedback Technology. Clinical biofeedback actually emerged as a discipline starting way back in the late 1950s. At its absolute core, it's the use of electronic instruments to measure physiological activities. But why do we do this? Well, with the direct intent of improving health and performance by helping you learn to consciously control those specific activities. Think about it for a second. Most of the time, we completely ignore the minute, subtle bodily responses happening inside us every single day. Biofeedback uses technology to actively monitor those hidden signals and then presents them right back to you, usually visually or through auditory cues. And that brings us to the core motif of today's explainer, making the invisible visible. This technology provides a literal dashboard for your body. It takes invisible processes, things like nerve signals, muscle tension, or even the microscopic fluctuations in your heart rate, and makes them completely visible in real time. By seeing these measurements change right in front of your very eyes, you're empowered to mentally control physical functions you may not have previously even been aware you had any say over. Moving right along to Section 2, the human feedback loop. Now, what's really interesting about this is exactly how different clinical devices translate our physical actions into measurable data. For instance, an electromyograph, or EMG, uses surface electrodes to detect muscle action potentials, which is essentially a fancy way of saying muscle tension. Then you have a feedback thermometer. That uses a thermistor to measure peripheral blood flow, which actually dictates your skin temperature. And an electrodermographer uses metal electrodes to measure eccrine-sweg gland activity, which naturally spikes when we're stressed or aroused. When it comes down to physical therapy, two of the absolute most critical measurements are muscle tension, tracked by EMG, and cardiovascular measurements like heart rate variability, or HRV. HRV tracks the tiny beat-to-beat differences in your heart rhythm. When a physical therapist layers this cardiovascular data with muscle tension data from an EMG, they aren't just guessing anymore. They can see exactly which muscles are firing, which ones are overcompensating, or which ones are lying completely dormant. Which brings us to Section 3, Biofeedback in Physiotherapy. I absolutely love this quote from our source material because it really highlights the synergistic aspect of healing. Biofeedback isn't just some standalone magic wand. You don't just hook yourself up to a machine and magically get cured. Instead, it's a tool. It's meant to be combined with other treatments, like the specific, targeted physical movements you do in physical therapy. It actively enhances the efficacy of those traditional treatments by drawing your awareness to your own innate ability to change your body functions. It is incredibly empowering stuff. So, how does this actually play out in a session? The process generally follows these three specific steps. First, the therapist monitors your physiological signals. Second, you perform specific physical movements while watching that real-time data flow in. You then adjust your physical effort based on the visual feedback you're actively getting. But the ultimate goal is always step 3, to master your body's mechanics so incredibly well that the changes endure long after you've stopped using the instrument. The whole point is to establish mastery over the body, entirely independent of the machine. Let's look at some real-world applications in Section 4, Restoring Movement and Balance. A recent systematic review found absolutely incredible support for using visual biofeedback to improve balance in elderly populations. Now, as we all know, as we age, losing balance can lead to devastating falls. It's a huge fear for many. But by bringing in this technology, patients can literally see their weight distribution and muscle engagement right on a screen. This allows them to consciously correct their posture, safely restore their confidence, and directly prevent those dangerous falls. It is also profoundly impactful in post-stroke rehabilitation. Stroke survivors regularly use EMG biofeedback to reacquire motor control. Studies show massive benefits for improving gait and walking ability, as well as enhancing upper limb function. Just imagine for a second how incredibly motivating it is for a patient going through a grueling rehabilitation process to actually see the data spike on a screen, showing that their muscle is indeed firing, even if the actual physical movement they can make is still incredibly small. It quite literally bridges the gap between the brain and the muscle. And this brilliantly illustrates where the true power lies: combination therapy. Studies looking closely at post-stroke upper limb function found that layering visual biofeedback directly over conventional physical tasks yields vastly superior functional results for patients who are fighting to regain their independence. Now for our final stop, Section 5, conquering chronic physical pain. Let me drop a staggering number on you just to really establish the stakes here. 13 million. That is the approximate number of Americans, and we're talking mainly women here, suffering from urinary incontinence. This is a massive issue of pelvic floor dysfunction that heavily impacts a person's quality of life. And it just so happens to be a prime example of exactly where physical therapy and biofeedback intersect to solve a deeply physical problem. Several systematic reviews, alongside a major 2021 meta-analysis, found that when you take standard pelvic floor muscle training and combine it directly with EMG biofeedback, you achieve significantly better outcomes than with the training alone. The combination results in superior outcomes for stress urinary incontinence, vastly increased pelvic floor muscle strength, and major improvements in overall pelvic floor dysfunction. Why? Because patients can literally see if they are engaging the correct internal muscles, something that is notoriously difficult to do by feel alone. Furthermore, EMG biofeedback is highly effective for chronic back and neck pain. A thorough meta-analysis of chronic back pain found a significant effect for pain intensity reduction, and get this, it proved to be stable even at an 8-month follow-up. That is huge. It also decreased overall disability and resting muscle tension. And for neck pain, studies found EMG biofeedback to be just as effective, if not even more so, than standard control interventions. It quite literally teaches patients to recognize and then intentionally release the chronic muscle tension that is actively fueling their daily pain. So the crucial point is this: this isn't some alternative guesswork. National and international medical groups use a very strict 1 to 5 rating system for evaluating biofeedback efficacy. Achieving a level 4 rating means the treatment is statistically significantly superior to a control condition or completely equivalent to established medical treatments. Conditions like urinary incontinence, adult headaches, meaning both migraine and tension headaches, and temporomandibular disorders are all rated as level 4, efficacious. It is highly rated, empirically supported clinical science. Which brings us to the end of our explainer today. But I want to leave you with a question to really mull over. What physical limitation could you overcome if you could actually see your body's hidden signals? By making the invisible visible, biofeedback isn't just treating symptoms, it's handing you the steering wheel to your own biology. It's such a fascinating look at the future of physiotherapy, and I truly hope it empowers you to explore how these kinds of tools might just fit into your own health journey. Thanks so much for joining me today.